So welcome back to Leadership Takeaways, and today with me here is Amy Cooper Hakim, who is an industrial organisational psychology practitioner. Hi, Amy.
Hi.
And she's all the way from Florida, which I gather it must be very, very sunny there as it is in the UK today. Always sunny in Florida. And the reason I've asked Amy to do this interview with me is not only because she's the very interesting side of psychology practicing, which is relating to business and organizations and behavior, but also because she wrote an Amazon bestseller, which was working with difficult people. And it's all about understanding, handling the 10 types of problem people without losing your mind. So welcome, Amy, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. And so we're going to whiz through the 4 areas today, and we're going to start with strategy, Amy. Now, when I listened to one of your interviews, and you were saying that very much where you came from is that you graduated in 2002, and your grandma, Muriel Solomon, was talking about you know, the different types. You have to correct me here, she was talking about motivation and time management and all these new areas being of real interest. And you decided to kind of look at the industrial organization side and how that applied to psychology. So was that kind of how it went? Your grandma inspired you from some of the talks with her, and that's where your strategy for, you know, sort of where you started in life, where you wanted to go?
Well, when I graduated college, actually, in '97. And when I was considering what to do for graduate school, I was thinking of either law or clinical psychology. And my grandmother pulled out this newspaper clipping and she said, look at this. This is a new upcoming field, industrial organizational psychology. And she thought, based on what she knew about me and my interests, that it would be a good fit. The field deals with motivation and goal setting, time management, helping employees and employers to get along better. And those are all things that really interest me. So I decided to take the plunge, and I went to grad school for that field.
Wow, you're lucky you had a grandmother who really knew you well, and she was able to kind of do the career matching for you. It's like, took me 20 years to find business coaching, and you know, that's supporting people was my field. So lucky you.
Yeah, when I was in college, I sold kitchen knives. That was my college job. And now I can cook. I mean, I have 3 kids. I have an obligation to cook. But back then, my family actually joked with me, how could I sell kitchen knives when I didn't know how to slice a tomato? But I was able to be successful with this job by learning this particular training program that every person who was working for them learned the exact same training. But for some reason, it worked well for me. I was able to take the information, apply it when going to customers, and I sold a ton of these knives. And it got me thinking, why is it that this works well for me? This type of training I was successful, but somebody else was in the exact same training class, didn't have the same outward success. And so that gets to goal setting, motivation, time management, how receptive or responsive we are when people ask us questions, along with various personality traits that might make someone a better salesperson than someone else. So all of those things wrapped up in a little package really were the applicable parts of some of the theories that I learned in years to come in grad school.
And you also must have had, as anyone I meet in this field, in coaching and psychology, you must have an interest or a love of people, you know, a want to help people. There's got to be something there, because just from...
Oh, definitely. I love to help people to feel happy and balanced, to get what they want and need out of relationships, to be able to come home to the things that really matter and enjoy their family, their loved one, their time off. Not always be focused and overwhelmed with some of the problems at work. I think that was one of the best pieces of advice when my grandmother was suggesting this field. She said, when you deal with real problems in a clinical psychology type world, these are real issues that carry through and follow through in family life and in personal life. And she said, with work, you can tie up your work issues, put it to the side, put your briefcase down, and then pick it back up that next morning, but really enjoy your life in between the time and those hours of work. And while in today's world, a lot of the time that we work and the time that we play is blended, and there's a much less defined boundary than there was, say, 50 years ago or 25 years ago. There's definitely some truth to that. And thankfully, we can make differences with who we deal with at work, with how we interact with people at work, with how productive and effective we are at work, so that we can go home and enjoy the people and the things that we really want to do. And oftentimes the reason we're working so hard so that we can enjoy those things at home, we want to make sure that our mind is clear to do so.
Yeah. And a lot of the emphasis behind you starting in your area of work was because you could see you were engaged in the training and you wanted to find those elements of, time management, etc., goal setting, motivation, and I get all of that. And then where does the 10 personality types come in? The 10 types of problem people. Where did that come into the whole of what you deliver?
Sure. So I, right outside of graduate school, I actually started working for Office Depot Corporation, a big company down in America, and it's also a global organization. And I had a great experience working with lots of different types of people. But something that I noticed is, even if it's not that one person has a fault that is purposeful, sometimes the way that we interact, we end up clashing if we're not able to better see the reasoning behind other people's behavior. So my grandmother actually wrote Working with Difficult People over 25 years ago, and she had 10 different types of problem people. But the book itself was lacking some of the modern things that are in today's world. My grandmother passed away, by the way, many years ago, and my oldest son is actually named for her. And so many, many years ago. But because she was a mentor of mine, and because she was able to make such a difference in so many people's lives, I approached the book publisher and asked if I might look at the content of her work and revise and modernize it for today's world. When we deal with global teams, when we deal with having a boss who always wants to contact you by cell phone or text message even after hours, not being able to put our work down at 5 and show up again without checking an email that next morning, how to deal with some of these changing issues, multi-generational teams, things that we see that really weren't around back when that book was first written. And it was such an honor and a pleasure to revise and modernize something and add to her legacy and hopefully make a difference.
Wow, what an amazing legacy for your grandmother. She'll be very happy about that, I should imagine. So that's where you started, and kind of the a bit about the strategy behind some of the work that you do. Moving up now to when you are in organisations, and the second element of leadership takeaways is looking at strengths and weaknesses. What strengths and weaknesses would you say, Amy, that have armed you throughout all of this process of writing a book and delivering this type of work to organizations?
Well, when I work with, as a consultant in organizations, I always make sure to listen and to truly hear not what I want to hear from that client, but what they're actually saying. And I try to teach them that same tactic when interacting with individuals. So I work with high-level executives, and then I also work with those people who report to those high-level executives. And oftentimes it's truly just an issue with miscommunication or noise, some of that, the chatter or the static that might happen when there is not a clear dialogue between people, when we talk around an issue instead of speaking directly to it. That's generally the main issue that I see. And I think sometimes it's just having an outside person come in and hear a perspective and actually repeat that back. Then they say, oh, wait, I didn't get that that's what was being said, or I didn't understand that that's this issue. And so being empathetic and kind, polite and tactful, and mirroring that so that others might want to follow suit is something that's important. I think that as a consultant, it's our job to lead by example so that then the leaders will do the same.
Yeah, and although it sounds simple, it's actually a really difficult quality to master, especially for me, who spent most of my life on broadcast, very good at being social. And a lot of that chatter came from insecurities as a child anyway. It was just a stereotype I invented to get over that, which obviously we all invent our own little stereotypes. But it's a very difficult quality to master. There are people who naturally are good listeners, but majority of the time, like you say, it's actually having that real awareness to not only listen, but listen to the gap. Listen, and I think this is a big thing in society now, that the people are so used to being numbed to the chatter that they, like you say, forget to actually listen to the unheard of. Although someone's speaking, they might not actually be speaking. And I think that's a really great skill that you've got there, to be able to show that to bosses, that although you've just said something, I'm going to ask a question on that because I'm really unclear. Whereas a lot of staff would be unaware that their boss has just said something. That's fine. That's great. I take on board what they said, but it doesn't make sense what that person just said, or actually that I need to ask you something. And I was listening to somebody today saying curiosity is, Einstein said the quote, there is a reason that curiosity is there and that we need to ask questions. Listen, but ask the questions, you know.
Sure. And I think what happens is, too often people become yes-sayers in an organization. They participate in groupthink. If one person says this is the way to go, then everyone's going to say, oh, sure, that sounds good. Instead of actually using their brain or being constructive in their thought, they're afraid to shake the boat. So instead what they do is they just say yes and everything's okay. But in fact, it's not. And then they're not able to provide perhaps a better solution or share why they think something isn't as good as it might appear to the person who's saying it. I like to talk to my clients about the road to Abilene. Have you heard of the Abilene paradox?
What was that? Abilene paradox?
Abilene paradox. There, and I don't know the story in its exact sense right here like this, but the gist of it is that there's a city and back, I believe in Texas, in the United States, and this is back in the day. It was a very hot day. There was no air conditioning. A bunch of people were just sitting on a porch, sitting in their rocking chairs, drinking lemonade, waiting for the heat of the day to pass. And somebody on the porch said, oh, do you want to go into Abilene to buy some sandwiches? And nobody wanted to go, aside from the person who made that suggestion. But one by one, everybody on the porch said, sure, let's go to Abilene. So they all hop into a car. And back then, of course, there's no air conditioning in the car. So they roll down the windows. The dust is flying in their face. They're miserable getting to Abilene. They sit in a very hot cafeteria with fans, but it's not pleasant, eating these sandwiches. After a while, one person says, you know, I really didn't even want to come. And one by one, each person on that table said, I didn't want to go either. And then finally, the person who made the suggestion said, I wasn't even sure we should go, but you guys all seem so excited about it. And so that's what happens. We all go down the road to Abilene by mistake, perhaps. And so what I teach my clients is to talk to their groups, their teams, about this Abilene paradox and say, just so we don't go down to the road to Abilene, and throw in a different suggestion. So people might feel more comfortable offering an alternative option if they don't feel that they're going to get stomped on for it, just because the fact is that we should be able to brainstorm. We should be able to avoid groupthink and share some great suggestions that we might discount. We might say, no, we're not going to do that. Or, you know, the boss might say, sure, I'm happy to hear it, but just so you know, I'm pretty set in my way that this is what we want to do. It's still good to have that type of an environment where people are willing and comfortable enough to share that idea. So that's, I always suggest to say, just so we don't go down that road to Abilene, and then let those other, you know, people actually offer their positions and perspectives too.
Yeah, and the big word of the moment for me is discretion. Having those discretionary powers that, like you say, following on from what the people feel strong enough in who they are that they can speak up, knowing that they have the trust and the faith in their organization, that even if what they're saying is maybe going against what they feel everyone else would agree with, that you know, that they have that. They feel that discretion in themselves to speak up and to know that it would be valued even though it might be disagreed with. And it just links back to the United Airlines, the thing in the paper where the person felt they need, I never read the news story because I tried to stay away from the news, but I heard somebody repeated it back to me that somehow they were dragging a passenger because they were not complying with the rules, yet actually a human rule is to treat each other with respect and honor. And so that obviously that person was living in a company where they felt they had to stick to the rules or else they would be, you know, this whole kind of command and control. There must have been some element of that there for them to feel that they had to stick to the rules and override a general human compassion to not treat someone that way. So yeah, that just reminds me of discretionary, which I've discussed quite a lot with consultants I've spoken to recently. It seems that's a real big takeaway for companies.
Oh, definitely. I mean, we have the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. We have to make sure that we always behave in a way that's morally and ethically sound, and push back if we feel that an expected behavior might go against our morals or our ethics.
Yeah, and another thing I just wanted to say, which might be of interest to you, is when you were describing some of the processes that you were talking about with organisations, it reminded me of another interview I did previously with a gentleman called Croft Edwards, who is a leadership consultant, just similar work practices as us, and his field was really looking at the energy flow in. I'm trying to think of the guy that he got the principle from, but an energy flowing company. So when he goes into the companies, he sits in the boardroom or in the offices and kind of just blends into the background like he's an employee and watches what goes on and sees where the energy blocks are, as in where some of the people are who might be negative or who might not communicate or might not like do what you say, like listen properly or question, and he finds where the energy blocks are and then addresses that. So it just reminded me of what you described.
That's a great plan. Yeah, a lot of times what my order is, I'll go and speak to the executive, find out vision and overall organizational goals and direction, and then obviously what the executive's hoping to get from me and my time in the organization. And then I'll speak to each of the individuals, either in a group or ideally privately, to find out what they feel their strengths are, if they feel that they're best being utilized in the organization, and what they wish they could say that they haven't had the courage to say or that they don't feel is being heard. And then I bring that information back, as long as that individual is comfortable with me sharing it in that format. I'll bring it right back to the executive and say, you know, here is what your team wishes you heard. Here is how your team views you. Here is what your team wishes they could have from you to be best supported so they can meet their own individual and team related goals. And it's amazing when you can close that gap and really have a smooth process where people feel valued and important and capable of being at their best. And a lot of times executives aren't able to free themselves of such a tight hold, and they're not able to empower or willing to empower their employees. But if we give our employees latitude with limit, like a box, so you have this amount of freedom. You can't go past these boundaries, but as long as you take control of your actions and do things as we've agreed within this particular box, within this boundary, you have that freedom. So you have that latitude, but the specific limits are you can't do X, Y, or Z. If you have this type of a question or it's going to cost the company this much money, you need to come to me or to whomever else to get approval. But once we give them that freedom, all of a sudden the employees feel valued, they feel committed, they feel that they are being heard. And then it really opens the line of communication, and the higher level executives are able to sit back, put their feet on the desk and breathe a little bit, and then also use that extra time to spend visionary meetings, to interact with people, to help to benchmark and grow their organization. So it's really a matter of creating a win-win feel for everyone involved.
A culture of courage, which is what Steve Jobs' coach he was a Steve Jobs coach, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he was on WBEX, a big conference, worldwide conference, and that's what he said, a culture of courage. I'm going to move on to the next section, Amy, and that looks at resources. And for many different people I speak to, it's all different depending on what their business type is. Obviously, depending on if you're a service type business or product heavy business. What would you say you lean on for your resources? Would it be people you collaborate with, or would it be research for your work, or what do you use? What's your support structure for resourcing your business?
Well, I definitely, with a degree in industrial organizational psychology, I do rely a lot on the theories and the current research, along with seminal articles from way back that help to promote the way that we behave. But I like to apply theory to the real world. So it's the practical application of important concepts that I find to be most important and valuable. So taking a particular theory and then seeing how we can use it in the real workplace is exciting. And so I use examples and benchmark what works well in other organizations so as to best customize an approach that would be most effective for the client.
And daily for you as a person, because obviously for us, yourself as a psychologist practitioner, and for myself as a business coach, sometimes people look to us as if we have all the answers, and we might not have all the answers. What do you use to support you, even daily practices that, and again, you're a mom with young children, and so you've got this whole big busy life going on. What's kind of your non-negotiables for you, Amy, on a daily practice?
Sure. Well, I do use LinkedIn. I make sure to stay in touch with colleagues who are in my field, to read up on current articles, participate in different discussions. I love the idea of having that level of interaction. I also am one to search a library, an online library, to find recent research to help a client to meet the particular needs. A lot of I think what we do is truly common sense, applying theory and then making it work in the real world. So I love to get feedback from others. I love to hear what people are doing that works, and then try it out myself.
What about physically taking care of yourself, like exercise, meditation, in whatever form, just time out?
I'm a huge proponent of work-life balance. Actually, I have another book that I'm hoping to get published soon with a publisher, dealing with work-life balance and finding a way to best meet our needs and the needs of everybody else with whom we have to interact. So it's really important to take care of ourselves and to put ourselves first, regardless of whether we're a parent or a spouse, a friend, dealing with a needy boss, how to make sure we carve out that time for ourselves. So personally, I chunk my time. I'm very specific. I have an Excel spreadsheet, and I know exactly how many minutes in a day I need to devote to particular activities. And in that, I also incorporate time to exercise. If I know I have a call, I sometimes will include a walk while I'm talking. It gives me a little more energy while I'm talking, and it also cuts out that need for my 30 minutes of exercise. So I do things like that. I do try to eat well and to relax. I actually take a full day off, a full 25 hours or 24 hours, where I do not do any work each week. And I find that is needed for me to revive myself and feel well rested and ready to attack, that next day with gusto. So it's important to me that I'm able to do the things that I want to do for myself and for my family and for my spouse, and not feel that I'm giving any of that up in order to work. I think that women in general struggle with this, even more so in today's world than a number of years back. How do we do it all? And the reality is that we can't. And so we have to make choices and prioritize those choices. And the non-negotiables need to be in a calendar. So if someone asks me to coffee or to lunch, I always say yes. Even if I have to say yes a week later, I say, I can't fit you in this week, but. And I always make sure that I accept the fun things, because everything else will work its way out. And that was a lesson I learned young in life. When I was in school, if I didn't have extracurricular activities, I still went to bed at the same time at night and still got the same grades on my tests as I did if I was on basketball or in the school play. And it's because we're able to allocate our time and our energy depending on what we have going on that day. I also do use a meditation app at night. I listen to some calming music, or even a way to de-stress that way. There's some great programs, and I think that that's very important. And I've even encouraged my children to do that. We sit and talk at night before going to bed, and if they're having a rough time, I'll say, let's listen to some sleep music, and they make fun of me, but it works. In 10 minutes, they're out.
Great app. Can you send it to me? It sounds amazing. Get the kids to sleep.
It's called the Calm app. The one that I have is Calm, and it's got cursive font. There's another one that is that's plain font, but the one I use personally is called Calm.
Yeah,
I like it.
Definitely. And just, I know we've got just like a couple of minutes left. Now that you've said to me you're going to be looking at this, publishing this book, now I'd just like to ask you one last question before we finish, which is with the work-life balance. And I get that, and I'm a big advocate of systems and systemizing, and like you say, diarizing, having a calendar, having a daily calendar, having a weekly calendar, a 3-month calendar, so it's all diarized, and you can get that balance, and then you can put the fun stuff in, which is so critical. But what would you give as just maybe a little tool, or a little just a giveaway to somebody who might be really struggling to get that work-life balance? Is there something you can leave us with on this recording of how they, you know, a suggestion of how they might handle if they're really struggling with the work-life balance? So I know you said about chunking, but is there something else they can do?
I mean, I think that it's important, first of all, to recognize that what everyone finds to be relaxing or comforting is different. So someone might find walking around the mall for an hour during a lunch break to give them a great sense of relief, whereas someone else might consider that a chore. So you need to stop and think about what it is that truly makes you happy, and try your best to fit that in every day. Even if you start small, 5 minutes a day of sitting quietly. Something that I do, I'm very clean. I actually take 2 showers a day. That's my time. I love to stand in a shower. I know no one is going to bother me. I have my quiet time and I'm clean, you know. So that's something that I instituted once I had young children. And I know that, you know, if my husband is gone at the office and, you know, he comes in late, then I know that when he's in, I'll say, okay, shower time, and I have my privacy. And that's just something that's incorporated in our family. But it's a good idea to try to do something to help yourself physically, spiritually, emotionally, and intellectually every day. So if you can put something and not mark off in a list that you've done something that can hit one or all of those buckets, you're in a good spot. So for instance, if I am talking on the phone to an old friend, that might be something that would help me emotionally. At the same time, if I'm walking while talking, then I'm doing something physically for myself too. And if we're able to even journal at the end of the day, say, did I do these things, or which of these things did I do? What did I hit in the physical category, the intellectual category, the emotional category, the spiritual category? What did I do to help myself feel like I'm taking care of me? Then everything else again falls into place. And we have to make that a priority, whether it's at the start of the morning, maybe waking up 5 minutes earlier before the day gets hectic, or giving yourself 5 minutes of alone time at night. Whether you live alone or whether you have a whole bustling family, there still are other competing priorities. And it's important to make sure that you put yourself first.
That is really, really great advice. And I totally adhere to that, just because I do the same thing. I have my ABCDEF system, which is similar to your, A is Audible, listening to Audible for 10 minutes. B is creating a blog or something that on social media that is a form of written content. C is making a call or making a sales call or a connection with somebody daily. D is walking the dog. E is exercise. and drinking water to take care of my body, and F is for fun. So I totally agree with mind, body, spirit. And I know it might seem a bit mechanical to some people and like regimented, but you so have to get, when you listen to people like us that take care of yourself, and the only way to take care of yourself is have that regimented, like you say, go for the walk while you're on the phone, go to the shopping mall, if that's what fires you up and that's what you love. I totally agree with you, Amy. I think for me, that's the #1 core thing that you can take away from any training that you do with people like us. Yeah.
When I worked at Office Depot, I worked in the training department in human resources, and I managed a group of people, and I needed to get away from the craziness of a normal corporate life where you're always in one meeting or another. And I literally scheduled 2 15-minute breaks in my day where I would go on a walk around the building. And if people wanted to talk to me, no problem, come walk. And I started something within my team, and it wasn't seen that it's not that I wasn't being productive. I was happy to talk to whomever wanted to come with me or to take a little mental break. However, it worked out. But it was something that was well received, and it gave me a boost so that I was more productive when I did sit back down. So anyway, stuff like that. There are easy ways to incorporate something to give yourself that needed rest or that needed boost.
I love it, but it's so great to hear it from someone as qualified a professional as yourself, and I'm totally on the same spot as you. So we're kind of on the mark of where we said the time we take to make the recording. So I feel I've gained so much from what you've said, even in these 30 minutes or so, and it's been so great to chat to you. And then maybe we can chat and do another interview once your new book's done. But is there anything you'd like to leave us with, Amy? Any other leaving thoughts before we end the interview?
Well, thank you so much, really. This was a pleasure. And always feel free to reach out to me if I can be of help. And my Twitter handle is Amy Cooper Hakim. And my website is amycooperhakim.com. So please feel free to reach out if I can be of help. And I do look forward to staying in touch, Rachel, and to our future dialogue. Thank you again for having me.
No, you're very welcome. And I definitely would recommend that people check you out and check out your book, Working with Difficult People, which they can buy from Amazon. And also, just to reiterate, the spelling of your name is Amy, A-M-Y, Cooper, C-O-O-P-E-R, and Hakim is H-A-K-I-M. So Amy Cooper Hakim on Twitter, and also .com for your website.
Thank you.
So thank you again, and amazing to speak to you. Have an amazing day, Amy, and we'll talk soon. Thank you.
Sounds great. Bye.
Bye.